I need to talk to somebody who sponsored the Dalai Lama. I needed to some help here. And somebody got on the phone. I told them what happened. They said, "Oh, he's your guru. He's inviting you to follow his teachings." And I went, "Well, how do you do that? I can't even get close to the guy. I'm up in the nosebleed seats."
Oh, this is major. It's like the next big thing. Come catch the wave, yeah. Watch what's happening. A force of nature. Hit 'em like lightning. Be the creator of the next big thing. We're the movers and shakers. We are the dreamers, the makers. We stand on top of equators. We are the limitless. We got the future, no papers. We are the innovators. We have the focus like lasers. You know we.
Greetings and welcome to the Compromised to Alchemized podcast with me, your host, Dr. Neil Boltondani. And with me today, I have Michael Shea, who is phenomenally well known in the topic of embryology. And, you know, in fact, he definitely distinguishes between genetic embryology and I believe morphological embryology. He'll know the term better than I will. I believe some of you who have journeyed with the podcast have heard others talk about embryology. And I don't really feel that most people that I have on are talking about it from a purely academical perspective or purely genetic perspective. And that's not to say there isn't value in that, but how does it pertain to us, and not only just us, but healing? How does it help a healer, know how to facilitate healing for someone that might come to you? But it's a person living on this planet. I love how Michael says, got to find your embryo. And he shares a little bit, but if you listen to some of his other podcasts, he goes into more depth on that. We really I wanted to take prior interviews and use those as springboards from which to jump off of and into topics that I really wanted to delve into, because he's been interviewed on many platforms over the years. I mentioned the Craniosacral podcast, and that's a phenomenal, beautiful resource that I've listened to so many of those episodes, and he has something like 5 or 6 interviews there. So, but hey, this is a great moment for me because I've talked about Michael Shea, different symposia and events that I presented at, different webinars. I've referred to Michael Shea as one who I've learned a lot about embryology from. And, his bio is something I'm going to read. And he sent me one. It was really short, and it was short and sweet. I appreciate that. But then I found another one, and I believe this is from a platform that Shariona Menzum-Sills put together. In fact, I'm going to interview her soon again on the podcast, and she's another one that I reference in so many of my teachings, and because really I owe a lot of credit to them for why I know so much about, I would say, morphological embryology. How does it show up in our bodies today? How does this influence how we work? For me, the floor of the mouth, helping people with these issues, we could say tongue tie, but we could just say airway, feeding, mobility. It has so much to do with understanding how we form in utero and how we are still forming. So I'll read his bio, but I'm really excited for you to listen. And we talk about things like his mango grove and why he, or what he does with all those proceeds. In fact, it's just a service for him. His mother was an inspiration for him to create the mango grove. And also we talk about his in essence commissioning by the Dalai Lama, his being a student of, he's being a student of so many great traditions. So here we go. Michael Shea, Dr. Michael Shea. He is got a Ph.D. along with a master's degree. He's one of the most preeminent educators and authors in the fields of somatic psychology, myofascial release, and craniosacral therapy. He presents seminars throughout the US, Canada, and Europe. A lot of what he does is in Europe right now. He received his master's degree in Buddhist psychology at Naropa University and a doctorate in somatic psychology at the Union Institute. He was certified in '86 as one of the first full instructors of craniosacral therapy by the Upledger Institute. And he was an advanced Rolfer for 20 years. He's currently adjunct faculty and teaches human embryology. This is outdated, right? So he taught embryology in the pre and perinatal psychology doctoral program at Santa Barbara Graduate Institute in California, which is epic because I just moved here under a year ago, and he taught here. So yeah, as a formal student of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, his teaching style is grounded in his spiritual practice of developing compassion with the use of manual therapy. And he also apprenticed on a Navajo reservation in Arizona with a medicine man. And yeah, he really does bring a unique cross-cultural perspective to teaching health and healing. So his clinical focus is on treating infants and children with neurological problems, developmental delays, and it also includes teaching clinical skills for adults that carry pre and perinatal trauma. So he is a founding member of the International Affiliation of Biodynamic Trainings and the Massage Therapy Body of Knowledge Task Force. Lives in Florida with his wife, Kathy. And yes, he'll talk about this, but he really felt the beautiful nudge, you could say that's the calling, the provocation to commit his life to helping people heal, yes, but to talking about the human heart and the heart and compassion and empathy. And that was provoked by the Dalai Lama, who said, this is your mission. He knew it already, I think Michael did, and I'm speaking for him now, but because I've had this chance to talk with him, we did over some time talk, kind of through email and WhatsApp before we had this conversation. So I feel like there was a little bit of getting to know him before, but I really got to know him over this chat, and really, without taking up more time, dive in. Please enjoy. Share it with somebody you feel needs this message.
We have to focus like lasers, you know we doing it big. Oh, this is major.
All right, well, officially, this time together, Michael, is something I've been looking forward to for years. I don't know how many years, but I reached out to you, and somehow, years later, we connected, and you were so gracious to chat and say you were going on this trip. I think it was Europe, where you teach often, and you said, can we look a few months? It was like October, and then you said, can we look to December? And I'm just gonna be honest, like I was like, that is forever. So for somebody who's been so excited to talk to you, I was like, how am I gonna wait that long to talk to you? I just, with all you've done in the field of somatic psychology, embryology, you know, eh, eh, Naropa and biodynamic craniosacral. By now people have heard what a um, you know leader in the field you have been. But I'm excited to delve into like some of those topics to share with people what's inspired me for years. For those of you, and there's gonna be others out there who are like, oh my gosh, Neil, you're talking to Michael Shea, because they're in biodynamic craniosacral therapy, and they're like, you're talking with the legend himself. So there's some people who are watching this that know your work really well, or they're listening and they've followed you for years, and they're going to be they're just going to be excited that we're having a conversation. So Michael, thanks for being here. I'm just enjoying already our conversation.
Neil, thank you. It's nice. I've never been called a legend, so I know I'm a bad boy, but I've got an interesting reputation. But it depends on how you would interpret the word legend. But we're
Yeah.
good. Let's go.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've contributed so much, and there's almost the aperture is so wide. We talked about this. We can
Yeah.
talk about embryology and the work you do in pre and perinatal and then also pediatrics, but ranging all the way to what you're looking at with metabolic health. And, I was very privileged to get your biodynamic cardiovascular book. And it just, wow, what a broad but deep work. And then I know you've got another work in the process, which
Yeah.
you may share about. So I just and I will say the other part here is that, shout out to Ryan, because of the craniosacral podcast and Ryan Halford. I listened to so many of those episodes, and I heard you. I had like 5 episodes on there. You were a
Yeah.
frequent guest, and I really loved, your work on like biodynamic immunology and just everything. So yeah, there's almost like this could be a one-sided podcast where I just talk about how amazing you are, but that's not why you're here. That's not why you're here. So, can you? I just with you have so much to share, but I just can't help but come back to like what I told you. Me and my kids were having mango yesterday, and I'm just like, there's this great sense of joy when I know you have 12 mango trees, and can you talk to me about the geometry of the mango? Does that ring a bell? Like the shape of it and what that speaks to you?
Geometry of the mango. Well, there's the legend right there, because they call me Mango Mike. And
Mango Mike, I love it.
yeah, so the geometry of the mango. Well, I think I shared with you really, I moved with my mom and dad when I was like 9 or 10 years old down here to South Florida when it was just a lot of barrier islands and there was no condos. And boy, there's a lot of condos right now. But at that time, in the history of mangoes coming into Florida in the mid 1800s, starting in Dade County, coming up to Palm Beach County, where I am. And, so you've got mangoes being introduced, and the soil here is perfect for them. It's just beautiful. And, but you've got maybe one or two varieties. And over the years, what the cultivation of mangoes has been so amazing in these three counties of ours that Palm Beach County now has like maybe 100, 200 cultivars that were developed here. And I think what people don't know is that when a mango drops from the tree and sprouts, it's not going to be mimicking the mother tree. You'll either get a better flavor or a worse flavor, or sometimes you get a similar flavor to the mother tree. So everybody that has these, because we have sprouts growing up all the time in the yard, they're all hoping that this will be the next great mango, the next great mango. So, but I have 12 dessert mangoes, and I did it in honor of my mother because she really introduced it to me. And it's in the cashew family. So in terms of the geometry, it's in the cashew family, the Anacardiaceae family, because it's a drupe. When a lot of the fruit looks like a drupe, so it's a member of the cashew family, and it's a fantastic fruit that people go crazy about here in the summer, and I'm sure in India they do as well. I planted in Alfonso. Alfonso is supposed to be the most famous mango tree, but I planted across the street. Then we sold the house, and I think the new owner cut it down. I was like, it's like a heart attack when I see a mango tree cut down. But I love my mangoes, and it's also a contribution to the community because we have a lot of fruit. I had no idea when I started planting them that they were going to get that big, or that we were going to have that much fruit. So my summer is about a community service. We provide mangoes to anybody that wants them. And so we give almost all of the crop away, except for the 10 or 15% that the squirrels get. And we love watching the squirrels eat them.
Oh, wow.
And the birds, there's two kinds of birds that eat them. That we have rabbits, indigenous rabbits, they eat them. It's a whole ecology around that I just absolutely love. And they're 25 million years old in terms of the fossil record.
Wow. Okay.
It's an ancient fruit. And you can smell it when they're blossoming, and they're blossoming right now. So, all right. So you got my mango story, and I love mangoes.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful that you're both the knowledge you have of it and also that it's the service. So that's really remarkable. And I think I heard you say somewhere that I don't know, it reminded you of the shape of a mango can be, kind of like a heart too when you look at it, and then I also see it could be like a kidney, and so as somebody who's poured over embryology, it's all the excitement I have when I when I hear those things because, well, of course, somebody who has well versed in embryology, the kidney and the heart, all the organs are so important, but to have a fruit that resembles that, it just a
Well,
ge-
Neil, let me tell you something about
uh-huh.
that. In terms of the geometry, or so to speak, the when you take the fruit off of the mango, you're left with a fibrous husk,
Hmm.
and it turns out that's not the seed. You have to open that up, and the seed is inside.
Yeah.
And the seed of a mango botanically is called an embryo.
Ah,
And when
yeah.
you open up a seed, and I know the embryology, I'm looking at about a 5 week old embryo. I mean, it
Ah,
takes on the exact form of about a 5 to 6 week old embryo. It's absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. And that's what the squirrels like the most. They love that embryo.
wow. Okay. This is something I did not know, but now I will. It's because I'll crack open
Yeah.
that to get into that, and I'm like, now I'm gonna look at it with more knowledgeable eyes. And yeah, so the excitement I have over that is like, oh, it's pretty good because I think somebody who takes such value off of the likenesses and the analogs and it's important to me to look at things in multiple facets and see like what I think something that you put in your biodynamic cardiovascular book. So when you talk about visualization a lot, and I love that because of how significant of a practice visualization has been for me in my life, my personal practice, but also when I do educate and train other healers, I often there's sometimes they're surprised by how pivotal the art and the process of visualization is, not only to like engage with the field and when you're holding somebody's head or wherever, but also to know, I say, but also that helps me know what's something I might want to do, or I might go to their foot, so in my mind I'll visualize going to their foot first, or I'll hold space for their foot to see how their cranials shift. And it just, to me, it's like when I saw you've taught people this, and I think you've for decades, right? You've been teaching. So maybe we could get into a little bit more of that, if you wouldn't mind sharing. I want to go into visualization because for me, I love the
Right.
rich and ripe topic that it is. But for you, can you share, I guess, personally, when visualization became an important, kind of topic, an important practice for you, and then from that, how did it influence how you learned, even before you decided to go to massage school and go to rolfing school and all the rabbit holes you went down? When did you
Right.
first start visualizing, and how did that lead you to study and approach healing?
Well, I think what you're talking about is just anatomical visualization, and I don't do a lot of anatomical visualization. In other words, I don't try to visualize perfect anatomy when I'm working with someone. I try to allow the body, when I'm in contact with the client's body, to impress me, impress my mind, impress my sense gates. And if an image comes up, and an image might come up, and sometimes the image or the thought, like
Hmm.
the image
Exactly.
of a sacrum, or the thought, then it's like go to the sacrum. So frequently visualization at that level, at the anatomical level, is a direction. It's a directive of a place to go. In terms of, for me, there are forms, as I was going through all this in the 70s and 80s, where people would visualize perfect anatomy. I don't do that. That can be controversial. It's controversial within the osteopathic community.
I agree. I totally that's the last place I go. So I
Yeah,
just want you to know too, when I'm talking about visualization, it's much more about that primordial intuitive what's beneath everything, so the in picturing the fire as you're working with
right.
somebody's, dantian, like the triple heater, and seeing flames come up and say, oh, I wonder if that area, upper,
Right.
middle, lower Dancian. So just so you know, that's where I'm coming from. But I think you have such a rich history, so I'd love to hear more.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, within that context, of the esoteric or the subtle body, I call that the subtle body because that's really what I work with.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of my book is about, the biodynamic heart. But so it really came to me, Neil, as in my spiritual practice, because I'm a
Mm,
Buddhist practitioner. And I've been in it for a long time, and I'm a long time meditator. But then there's a part of the practice where my teachers started having me do visualization practices. And, that means the subtle body. That means
mm,
visualization of the central channel and the visualization of different chakras and so forth. But I've also been a student of Tibetan medicine for
mm,
almost 50 years, and studied with some of the great, great masters early on when I was at Naropa University in Boulder in the mid 80s. And I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to become a Tibetan physician, which I decided not to, because I had to memorize 600 herbs, and I was not a good student. I couldn't memorize
mm,
nothing. So
mm,
I went, oh, I still want to pursue Buddhist healing in that perspective. So I went to Naropa University. But from the context, I continued studying Tibetan medicine because my teachers now are connected with Tibetan medicine in terms of the lamas that I studied with, in terms of what's called Ati Yoga or Dzogchen. But they're
mm,
connected with Sowa Rigpa, which is Tibetan medicine. So within that being the context, Neil, the key point here is that you've got the 5 primary colors associated with the 5 elements in the Indo-Tibetan system. And that's the key point. And that these colors are medicinal. Just visualizing the body as white
mhm,
is medicinal. And then so we go through the white and then the blue and then the yellow and then the red and then the green. Now, all of them then have different meanings and interpretations. But like last night, when I have trouble getting to sleep in the middle of the night, I just go ahead and I visualize my heart. That's where I start.
mhm,
Visualize my heart as the color white, and then that white is radiating out, and my whole body becomes white.
mm,
And
mhm,
then I let it become blue, whatever shade of blue. My heart. So I start at the heart, and I work out from there. And so when I teach the visualization, what I teach is to deliberately let the body or the heart, it's your choice, become a color, and starting with white and seeing which color works. And the reason for all of this is you want it to become spontaneous, so it becomes
mhm.
alive. There is a knowing and there is an intelligence located within these colors. This is not the blind leading the blind, so to speak.
Right.
There is an intelligence within these colors at a spiritual level, and
Mhm,
it's connected to our metabolism. And the way it's connected to our metabolism is that every single cell in the human body emits biophotons. And at cell death and cell division, photons are released. Visualizing these medicinal colors from Tibetan medicine, which it's very fine for anybody to do. They affect our metabolism because the contemporary client is metabolically sick and
mhm,
sick beyond belief metabolically. They might not be manifesting symptoms, but they soon will be. And it's kind of a horrible way to live, just in terms of death and dying, in terms of what happens with metabolic syndrome. Your organs basically melt in the long run.
mm,
And from too much sugar, from processed foods, all these lifestyle things that we hear about. But at any rate, the colors, the colors are critical because they affect our metabolism. So we're using colors in the spiritual sense of the subtle body. And we're using those colors to affect the metabolism and the cells of our physical body. And that's how they function in healing. And that's how I unfold it in my teaching. But within that context, it's not just throwing colors out
mhm,
at your client.
mhm,
I'm a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. I've evolved into teaching a model called biodynamic cardiovascular therapy. This work, Neil, in all of our work, all of our manual therapy work involves perception. And where do we want to place our attention, our inner perception, and how we're defining and deciding and differentiating the sensations that are coming our way. In biodynamic work, the differentiation is typically between the perception of primary respiration, which is the long tide, the slow tide, whatever you want to call it, the tide, as Dr. Becker
Hmm.
called it,
Yeah.
and the dynamic stillness.
Hmm.
Those are the two principal aptitudes that we try to get our students to synchronize with, slowness and stillness, because we know biologically that's how molecules and cells in the body function the best. When you add I call it the third biodynamic aptitude of visualization, then you've got a more complete package for the contemporary client, because the contemporary client needs a little more help than
Hmm.
primary respiration, which is the element of wind, and
Right.
the dynamic stillness, which is the element of space. When
Hmm.
you add in color, you add in the cell elements as they're associated with the wisdom aspects of those colors, because the elements and the colors go together. They're one thing. But when you start it from the color end of it, you then have the metabolic linkage that's necessary to the elements, and the healing linkage to the elements and the metabolism. It's a beautiful system, and it functions quite well. I've been teaching it now for 6 years, and the students are saying they're getting fantastic results with their
Yeah.
clients.
Okay. Well, this is so, obviously the experience from which you speak, and many students, I know that have learned from you. It's quite a tradition in and of itself. I think I'd love to go to the kind of this broad ranging spectrum, mentioning metabolism, and your contemporary client, that love to delve into that, and then I'll come back to going back to the talk about with babies. Actually, a really practical thing I'd love to ask you here is, many, whether they're dealing with sleep and issues with regulation, nervous system wise themselves, or the parents who are trying to help their little ones. I have my own practices. I have one kid woke up twice last night, and the other one woke up once, and I'm like, okay, so that was like several times last night. So I have my way of holding them, very physically, but also bringing some of these aspects of co-regulating in visualization. But how would you say, like, you yourself, that white light helped you, in anyways, with the parent who's got their baby or 5-year old, would you say, how would you envision them engaging in visualization to help their little one fall asleep? Would there be something very specific, case by case, or would you say there's a general recommendation you could make?
Well, I mean, in terms of a general recommendation, the in this cosmology, this Buddhist cosmology, I mean, the universe as we know it, visually, and how it appears is the radiance coming from our heart.
Mhm.
So when I work with infants, I typically, if the parents allow me to hold the child, I hold them over my heart. And what
Mhm.
I do is I just radiate them. The At the deeper level, the basic color of the heart is blue.
Mm.
So it's a diamond bluish. I mean, it's a gorgeous blue. And I just then radiate the child with this blue light. Um, when I'm at the beach or wherever, whenever I see a baby in public,
Mm.
I sit there and I don't think about the baby or anything. I just let this burst of blue light come out of my heart, and I let it surround the child. It's very, and I don't, there's a lot of discussion in pediatrics whether you should have the color or your intention go inside the child or not. It's fine just to wrap the child, because the child came from light. The child is going to light. The child, all of us, Neil, radiate light. It's constant. When you look at the biophoton literature, it's amazing. It's all measured, but we can temper that if we add in the fact that there's an intelligence there. So
Mhm.
children, I also like to visualize my hands as blue light with the heart meridian,
Mm.
starting up here, heart one, going all the way down, and then heart eight being right in the palm of the hand. So what I do is I let the radiance, the blue light radiance of my heart come down through the heart meridian, my arms, and then I let my hands. So if I have my hands on someone, then I can radiate blue light, very light blue light coming from my hands. Now, for everybody listening right now, it's like, I know some of you are saying, oh, I don't know how to visualize. I can't visualize colors, or I don't like the color blue. Let me tell you something. Your spiritual practice in day-to-day life have to be very creative. Use any color that works for you.
Hmm.
Every chamber of the heart there's a rainbow that is radiating from the heart. I've done a meditation where the right atrium is yellow, the left atrium is blue, and so forth. And you go through the color spectrum with the chambers of the heart. So use whatever color works for you. If you want to just do it as a radiance, or if you want to use your hands and radiate the client, the child, with your hands. And just really, the key to this is closing your eyes, rolling your eyes up to the middle of your forehead, because that stimulates the optic chiasm, and you can generally see a brief flash of light, and that is what ignites the visualization practice, as I teach it. So those are just a couple of tips for the listeners with kids and your clients. This is
Yeah.
the way it works.
No, I'd love to. I'm going to ask you about the work with infants that you've done for a long time, and but he was going to say, yeah, my dad's a cardiologist. He boy started practicing in the late '70s. Came over from India to finish his medical training in Chicago, and I think I said something like 6 years ago. I think I told him um, I started, walk and talk, and I told him about you and the work you were doing. And so he was, my dad's a healer. Started out as in India, his dad was a trucker that sold salt, and then they sold, vegetables. And so this is where he came from. Then he ended up a cardiologist and a pioneering one. And so in the States, so I think both the story of the mangoes and how important they were to you with your mom, and how my dad always, we'd buy this box of 24 mangoes, Devon Avenue in Chicago, and he'd always, very meticulously find which is the right batch, and then he, among other fruits, we would just get to enjoy this sweet, delicious fruit. But to me, it always just spoke to me how much he with his patients, there was something more than just the actual physical, assessment and the healing. He is very holistic in terms of looking at what's going to give them joy, what's going to bring them, So, and also from India, some of these things that you're talking about here in the West, we have people listening from all over, but sometimes in the Western world, we also have a different way that we look at these things as separate from living, that we add on visualization, or separate from our healing practice or our healthcare practice. Then we delve into Ayurvedic and Chinese, or even further down. And it's like, well, interestingly, these realities in the Eastern world existed and predate what we have here. So
Yeah,
I always love saying, like, well, we can look at these as things that we add on, but those who go down this, you say, well, you're kind of reaching back in time to the ancient ways, to the golden things that are immutable. They'll never stop being, in essence, of how we can, live from and teach from. So I love that you blend very contemporary understanding and forerunning research into what you're doing, but also you, from all of your experience, you pull in the ancient knowledge that is really what sets us all up. So to I want to ask you about some of the studies that led you to that, but first, could you talk to me? When did you start working with infants? And kind of where in your career trajectory did you start working with infants, and what was that like?
um, wow. In my career trajectory, I mean, I went from massage school in 1976 or 77, and there was no continuing education for manual therapy in the United States, except for a couple of organizations out west.
Yeah.
Polarity Therapy,
Mhm.
Lomi Lomi, and the Rolf Institute.
Yeah.
So I ended up at the Rolf Institute in 1979 and went through the Rolf training. And there was a Rolfer in Philadelphia that specialized in working with children with cerebral palsy.
Mm,
And it called to me.
mm,
That's all I know. It called to me. I was like, I would really like to do that. I would really like to have my hands on kids. So it was a calling. And I had a client in my office, and she would fly in from Cincinnati, and she was a pediatric physical therapist. Wonderful woman, this like early 80s. And she really liked the Rolfing work and the myofascial and all that, because I wasn't doing cranial at the time. And
mhm.
she said, I have an office in Cincinnati, and I've got a lot of these children with spastic cerebral palsy and so forth. And I'd love to have you come work on them. And she said, do you have any experience working with children? And I looked at her, I told her a bold-faced lie, absolutely. I'm happy to come and work on your kids. So, and that's what it started. I got placed into a room
Mhm.
with 10 to 15 children with varying degrees, varying ages, from like maybe 2 or 3, up to 8 or 9, that had spastic cerebral palsy, some other mixed diagnoses, sensory disorders and things like that. So I began to parse and learn a lot with all of that. How all of that birth trauma gets differentiated, or prenatal trauma, or perinatal trauma from the parents. And so I've seen a lot. I've seen a
Mhm.
lot. Um, and what happened is gradually that morphed into I specialize in working with children with persistent vegetative state.
Okay.
Really, really compromised infants and children. I was just talking about it yesterday with a doctor in terms of fetal alcohol, fetal cocaine, and fetal heroin. Those are the types of children that I or infants that I was working on. Because when they
Mhm.
come out, they are so compromised, they need help immediately.
Yeah.
And because there's not a lot of help in the medical community for what's happening because of their nervous system and their behavior, and they were bringing in everything they could from the outside.
Yeah.
So my first work with infants and children, especially infants, were very, very compromised children.
Yeah.
Gradually over time, what happened is I learned the cranial concept, and the pediatric physical therapist and the pediatric occupational therapist, they loved the cranial model because it was effective in
Mhm.
terms of getting results, in terms of the tone of the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system lowering. And they started these big camps where they'd have, the upledger style of cranial work. And so I began teaching a lot around the country, different medical schools, different pediatric clinics, and teaching the cranial model per se. I taught the myofascial model, then I transitioned into the cranial model. And from there, began studying pre and perinatal psychology. So then there was that whole dynamic that occurred right there in Santa Barbara, where you are,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. So I was
Mhm.
asked to come in and teach embryology to the doctoral students of pre and perinatal psychology, and
Wow.
also to the doctoral students of somatic psychology. And it was through that collaboration that I got connected with a tremendous group of academic experts and clinicians having to do with pre and perinatal psychology and the resolution of prenatal trauma, birth trauma, and perinatal trauma. And so I gradually worked into a trauma specialization, and then just gradually palliative, not palliative care, but preemptive, people wanting their baby treated because
Yeah.
the baby was healthy, but would
Yeah.
you treat my baby just to make sure? And that's an
Mhm.
osteopathic tradition. Every baby in osteopathic hospitals from the 30s through the 50s, they all got an osteopathic treatment. So I learned how to treat infants in that initial osteopathic phase, to evaluate physically, to evaluate metabolically, and now I teach evaluating the infant and the cardiovascular system to promote metabolic health. So, those are the 3 phases of my learning. And that's where I am right now in terms of my work with infants and children.
Oh, that is, yeah, I love that. Right here in Santa Barbara, you were teaching embryology to these students, and there's so much. You could, like you said, we could just camp out at pre and perinatal work, and then you would have so much to share. But that's all of that kind of. I know it provides you with speaking of your own view of who someone is and how you might help them if there's somebody that comes to you. um, there's so many lenses through which to look when you're apprehending someone, but I know also your students, these many that you've taught, um, they're also going to get that opportunity. But I also, with your book, uh, you open this up, it's massive compendium, right? It's like, whoo, huge book, but it's beautiful. And you just feel like right away you open the pages and all of a sudden I feel like I'm in a class with Michael Shea. And disclaimer, nothing compares to going to you and nobody would presume that reading a book is just as good. But I can feel like those pages and what's gone into that work, and I look and I see the precise way that you explain some of these concepts on towards the end, how to I've made notes and so I'll find them, but I how to position your hands and how to approach this, the Cossacks, and with the cranial rhythm in mind. It's There's so much to say. So but I'm going to go back to something else. That's my goal here, is to like really ask you these questions that I want to know about, but I'll start with a joke here. So you talked about the work you did with llamas, and I just want to know, how many farms with llamas did you go to, and and what was the no, I'm just kidding, right? I want to hear about your work with the Dalai Lama, and because I've gone to ranches and I've worked with llamas and helped them heal, like the animal. I just couldn't help but go there in my mind. And of course, the
Yeah,
dad of little kids, right? Llama
right.
Llama is a
Yeah,
famous
yeah, yeah,
book
yeah.
series, right? Right. So, could you tell me, before we'll delve back into, there's a little bug flying around. Sorry. So that's why everybody sees my hand go like that. Uh, Before I go back into embryology and some of the pre and perinatal, um, could you share that the maybe the end of this? What is what did the work what you've done with the Dalai Lama and the lamas, if you've worked with more, then practically, you mentioned that still today that engages your work, and how does that happen? I know of the moment that, but I can't remember when in time you studied with the Dalai Lama that led you to your life's work. So I kind of want to go to both of those ends of this topic, if that's okay, and you start wherever you want on sharing with that.
Um, I might as well start with the Dalai Lama because you can see
Okay.
him in the background. I mean, I went to Naropa University. I mean, when I got to Boulder, I was just the new kid on the block, and
Mm,
it's like, oh wow, everybody's meditating. I guess I should learn to meditate, because that was the other thing. I wanted to learn how to meditate, and
mm,
I tried transcendental meditation, and I hated it. I hated the mantra thing, and I got just lost in my mind. I also joined 3HO, and I taught and was certified in Kundalini yoga while I was in massage school. I wore a turban.
mm.
I now call myself jokingly Swami Mike. So I tried a lot of spiritual paths.
Mango Mike and Swami Mike. We got some cool
Mango
nicknames.
Mike and Swami Mike.
There you
I
go.
like Swami Mike better because if I was going to write an autobiography, it would be called Autobiography of a Bogey, which is
Ah,
Sanskrit for indulgent yogi, because I
ah,
really am an indulgent yogi. So
okay.
Autobiography of a Bogey. But
A
at any
bogey.
rate,
Okay. I didn't know that term.
yeah, I got to Boulder, and I got to tell you that the community, the Lama there was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, mixed reputation now, mixed reputation then, brilliant Lama.
Sure.
And but the main practice was called Shamatha Vipassana. And I just have to say, for anybody listening, um, please learn how to meditate. The world we live in requires that you turn inward and you
Mhm.
be able to calm your mind, calm your thoughts, calm your emotions, and calm your concepts about good and bad. And meditation practice will help you with that, but you got to turn inward. And that's what it did for me. They offered free meditation instruction at the big shrine rooms there in Boulder. And I signed up and I got my meditation instruction in the side room. And I went into the big room, and Neil, I sat down and I did this technique for 1 minute, and I had this wave of homecoming come over me. I was home. I had found home. I could have an antidote to settle the intensity of my mind and the emotions and the stirrings and all that go on. So within that context, I was also a manual therapist going through the Rolf Institute. And then I got disabled. I blew a disc in my neck. I couldn't do body work anymore. So I went to Naropa University and had 3 years off, had a good student loan, drank a lot, got my degree, barely got my degree, and was exposed to other teachings at that time. And my father died. I came home right the day after I graduated. I came home because my father had died, and I was my mother's healthcare surrogate. So I came home here to Florida, and that's where I am now, and just helping my mom. And she died in 2004. This is kind of a long interlude here, but it's a good story. She died in 2004, and it was hard. It was very hard. And I'm Irish, and I started drinking too much. My wife was very concerned, thought I should really get to a AA meeting or something. And there was a notice that the Dalai Lama, for the first time ever, was coming to Miami, Florida, and doing a 3-day teaching. And I had a friend of mine said, let's go. And I went, yeah, sure, let's go. And I'm drinking at night, and I'm coming and I'm up he always chooses basketball stadiums because that's about the number of people, 5,000 people.
Yeah.
So I'm in the nosebleed seats in the back of the auditorium, and I'm looking at the Jumbotron, and I'm listening to him talk. And I think I've told this story because you mentioned it to me when we first started talking, and he entered my mind stream, which is what lamas do, which is what spiritual, high level spirituals can do. They develop that capacity within that level of their chakra system that they can enter the mind stream of another person. And he and I began having a conversation, and I didn't realize, because I was hungover till that night. I was like, wait a minute, was I going crazy? So the next day I went in, and it happened again. And so what I did after that is I called the organization. I said, I need to talk to somebody who sponsored the Dalai Lama. I needed some help here. And somebody got on the phone. I told them what happened. They said, oh, he's your guru. He's inviting you to follow his teachings. And I went, well, how do you do that? I can't even get close to the guy. I'm up in the nosebleed seats. Doesn't make any difference. So the next year, I went to become a formal student of his in the ceremony of Chenrezig in Zurich, Switzerland. So in 2005, I did the Chenrezig ceremony where I became a formal student of his and was given work to do. So at the time, he wanted all of his students in the auditorium to become Buddhist scholars. So I got connected with a Buddhist scholar, Alexander Berzin, and I began editing Buddhist texts for about 10 years until I started writing my own books. So the important thing here, Neil, is that I've got a principal teacher, and the teaching, it's a simple teaching, because when I finished the tantric level of his teaching in 2011 at the Kala Chakra ceremony in Washington, D.C., and that's a much bigger situation, and it's a much more complicated visual, because you get introduced to visualization practices that we talked about a little bit earlier. And he came into my mind and he said, look, there's going to be a lot of complex stages here. Just stay in your heart. Feel your heartbeat. That's all you have to do, because that's his teaching, is to stay in the heart. And his teaching for his students now is to set up centers for the study of the human heart. So my website, all my writing now is associated with how the heart develops, the spirituality of the heart in different traditions, but to really stay focused on the heart. And that's what the teaching is. And that's how the biodynamic heart came about. And as you see in the dedication to that book, that it's dedicated to him. Um,
Mm,
so I'm very grateful because I will say he saved my life. And the
mhm,
reason I'm saying this is because I get a lot of pushback, Neil,
mm,
in the world that, oh, Shea's claiming that he's connected to the Dalai Lama and he's just using that as a marketing tool. It's like, really? So there's a denial of, the inner experience, and nobody, I wanted to tell this story so people hear the reality of this. And not that I care about that anyway, because I know that's the way the world works. But as I said earlier, I also study Tibetan Buddhism. So I'm engaged with another Lama, Lama Justin, in Boston at the Yangti Yoga Institute, and his teacher, Dr. Nita of Pure Land Farms, who's a Tibetan physician. So I've taken some coursework with Dr. Nita, who's a Dzogchen yogi, but also a Tibetan physician. And so I've kind of learned within that lineage, because I also got an empowerment from Namkai Norbu, the Lama in Italy, who died some years ago, and
mm,
he was also a Tibetan physician. So I've received a variety of empowerments around Tibetan medicine, and so that's my current study with that Lama. Which again, it's to enhance the meditation practice. You got to stay in your
mm,
heart. You've got to really get a handle on your thoughts, and you've got to get a handle on the emotions. You can't get rid of them because we're human, but you have
mhm,
to learn how to ratchet down. And I think the biggest problem with our culture right now, Neil, is the conceptualization of good and bad and
mm,
the polarization that's happening.
yeah,
That's an inside job. Until you eradicate good and bad in your own mind stream, then you're
mhm,
not going to be able to be of much benefit to the world in terms of how to manage wisdom within a world that appears good and bad, if that makes sense to
mm,
you.
yeah. No, it's true, and in between the words that you shared, I see, like, where the wisdom that you have comes from, and, no, I just would say, so it's very stilling in a good way. It's like, and I just think there's almost like the sacred silence right now. I feel like inclined to just say, everybody, like, slow down, hear what Michael just said. It was very loud, very booming, but only if you heard between his words, because you are talking, but it's really from this repository of, you've steeped, I was just picturing tea. You've steeped yourself as tea. Now, normally we'd say for a really great, tea, you might just steep it for 90 seconds, 30, you don't steep tea for that long unless you do like an Indian, I learned from my dad, when you're making chai, right? You have to boil it twice, let it bubble over, spices, etc. But when you're talking about just tea leaves, they're precious and delicate. But Michael, you're like tea leaves have been steeping for your whole life with the wisdom that's like coming into being. So I don't know, so many, anybody that I know that has come across your work, it just, they kind of will say that you are so humble and you have such a reverence for humanity, but also for traditions and for expanding the what you know. So you're constantly learning, but so it's very, very staggering in one way how much you do hold yourself in a place of just like oneness with everybody. So I couldn't even imagine somebody who would say that you're claiming anything other than, it gives us context. It does. I really appreciate your context because you come from a place that is, um, there's just such respect I think you have for who's gone before you, and then I think this is just such a great attribute that you pass along to any listener, but in any student, and anybody has the fortune to, have your ministry of laying on of hands, as you said, and like you've looked at your work as a way to transmit. But maybe we could go back to um, the work that you've done with, with infants, and can you tell me, I guess it's not really where I want to go. I couldn't help but think of um the conversation you had with Tim on the original Strength podcast, which he asked you about some of your work, and I just you shared from this wide aperture. Um, at the end, he asks you everybody, do you like what do you think about peanut butter? Do you like peanut butter, and what kind? And it's so funny because we can reconnected. I'm going to interview him on my podcast tomorrow. He's interviewed me on his, but I just think like sometimes it's this we need the serious, especially with the world as it is. We need to really, I love your provocation. If you don't meditate, just learn that. And then I think, our world is so serious. We need silly more than ever. So what is the okay? This is Tim. It's not my peanut butter question. It's not his peanut butter question, but what is the silliest practice that you think has helped you? Is it making silly faces? I don't know why I feel led to just make this silly question. But what's the goofiest thing, whether you're with families, with infants, and you're trying to like bring levity to a situation, or your own life with your wife or whatever it is? What's the silliest thing that's given you the most joy? I'm throwing you off guard here with this question because you couldn't have seen this one coming.
No, that's okay because my within the context of you got to meditate and the world's falling apart and blah blah blah. Within that, the world has also lost its sense of humor. So I have a dear friend of mine who's also a cranial practitioner, and we bought the domain name last year of firstlaugh.fun. And I'm going to plan because I'm close to retirement and all that, whatever that might mean. I mean, I'm still going to write and teach,
Yeah.
but I want to create a type of a podcast where we just talk about healing and humor and the role of humor. And
Right.
we've seen that in the past how humor can have cancer and remission and things like that. But the value of humor. And so what happens is in my classes, I try to show Far Side cartoons when I'm teaching in Europe because it drives them crazy. And I love laughing at Europeans that don't understand American
Oh, got it.
cartoons.
Got it. Yeah.
So the cartoons, as you know, are so silly, but I always show cartoons in my classes. And I had one translator one time say, I will not translate. No more cartoons.
Oh my gosh.
And so but in Italy, they love the cartoons. So they do it by committee. So, and I just love getting silly because silliness creates safety.
Yeah.
When the teacher can relax and be humorous and the class can participate in that humor, so the better. So I have a basic rule in all my classes, and that is anybody that wants to raise their hand and say, I need a joke right now,
Hmm.
I will either pause in that moment and tell a joke, or I will wait until the appropriate moment and I will promise you'll get a joke soon. So I always tell jokes in
Okay.
every class just to get silly.
I'm raising my hand. So you don't have to do it now, but maybe at the appropriate time, Michael, I'm asking for a joke. So just just I'm taking you up on that right in here in the middle because this is golden. I now remember you mentioned this on a podcast. Okay, I can't think of which one it is, but it must have been recent. So I love that you're doing that. That is so necessary. This is one of the reasons I love slapstick humor, good clean humor. When I interject whatever my sessions are, parents are with their kids, and the parents are, one of the thing is the parents want the kids to be like mindful and present, and I'm like, that's true. I respect your parenting, but like in the moment, like whatever's going to help your little one, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever age they are, like feel at home and safe, like I'm gonna do. So,
Right.
I'll my kids are used to me doing this from early on where I'm in the middle of talking and I'm, my work with the tongue and the floor of the mouth and all the work that I do with that and specialize in. I'll just start talking and I'll say, "Ugh," and then I'll say, "Oh no, tongue, could you go back in my mouth?" Oh, phew. Phew is a like when I say to the kids, I'm relieved. I say, "Oh, that was a phew." I'll say,
Right.
"That was so good." "Oh, no, Tom, you did it again." And my 7-year-old Cypress, I'll end this part with me. He's like, "Dad, do the thing where you go, and I go, "Okay, all right. Tongue, come on, I was just trying to talk to Michael here. Tongue, would you go back in my mouth?" So the tongue just says no, and we crack up, and I love it. My kids like, but that's one of the ways I taught them how to do like
Yeah,
really good tongue
yeah,
movement because they would
yeah.
imitate me, move their tongue, get it through the roof of the mouth, and they would breathe. And I'm like, as a kid, I don't want to stuff my tongue to the top of the roof of my mouth to get nasal breathing. But if you tell me there's a character that we could laugh about and giggle about, we're going to do that way sooner. And I would personally, I have way more fun than that than just saying tongue to the roof of the mouth. And so I'm like, tongue, would you go to the bottom? Would you go to the floor mouth? And then the tongue gets up to the because it's
Right.
rebelling. So, anyways, little interjection there. I haven't shared that much about that practice of mine, but yeah, tell me like what's a moment you recall, whether it's in session with patient or a joke you could share with us that shows just anything that comes to mind.
Well, I'll give you Buddhist teaching
Okay,
first, and then another teaching,
cool.
because there's a Buddhist teaching that I do like to practice periodically, and also teach it, and that is um, for anybody that chronically gets up in the morning and is not happy or is moody or doesn't want to go about their day or is hungover. The teaching is to stand in front of the mirror and force yourself to smile
By grabbing
Right.
the sides of
And
your
and
mouth.
what that does is it activates the parasympathetic nervous system and
Mm,
improves vagal tone. And
yeah,
and if you don't smile at the mirror when you're doing that, then something's really wrong with you.
yeah,
So you
totally.
just lift up your cheeks. But Neil, I have to tell you, and thank you for being on this subject because we need levity for
Yeah.
healing.
Mm,
I had a number of people die last year in my life. My sister, and
mm,
then Franklin Sills passed away, one of the
yeah.
big founders, and
Mhm.
other people. And I ended up leading three memorial services.
Mm,
Uh, and I led a memorial service online, three, maybe four memorial services. And in each of the memorial services, because I'm kind of new to this, um, but I always brought a joke book. I
mhm.
brought jokes about death and dying, just in case we got into a still point and people didn't know where to go.
Yeah,
I was
right.
going to tell a death joke.
Mhm, mhm.
So, and the reality is, I never got to tell any of the death jokes I had because there's a great book of death jokes.
Mm.
And I never got to tell one of the death jokes. So I took a picture of it just last week, and I've been sending it around to people. This is the death joke I didn't get
Oh,
to read
mhm.
at any of the memorial services, but nonetheless, people do share in a memorial service. They share very poignant pieces, but they also love to share the funny things
Yeah.
in their relationship with the person that passed. And I think
Mhm.
that's part of the beauty of death and dying is, that you can add in the humor because people want to remember not the bad stuff, because there's always the
Mhm.
bad stuff, but they want to remember the good stuff. And that's what I love about these memorials because you only hear the good stuff. You don't hear,
Mhm.
oh, I don't know about him, but you hear
Mhm.
just the good stuff. I had to give, and I'll say this, the first eulogy that I ever had to give in real time was to a bank robber that had been shot and killed in a bank robbery.
Mm.
And I didn't know this, but his mom was my roommate when I was going and teaching at a massage school here when I moved back in the mid '80s. And she said, "I've got a favor I want to ask of you." And I said, "What's that?" She said, well, my son was just shot and killed. He's a bank robber. Could you do the eulogy in the church? So I ended up doing the eulogy, and they found a church that allowed the bank robber to be eulogized. Um, but it was a very interesting story. So I'm kind of used to that of these strange circumstances, and also needing to add in some degree of levity,
Mhm.
within that. So in Germany, and here's an interesting story. So I will tell if somebody asks for a joke, I've got this whole repertoire of parrot jokes, and I'll tell a parrot joke because it's neutral, or
Yeah,
I'll
that'd
have
be a
one
good
of
one.
those. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not going to offend anyone,
Sure, yeah, I like
except
that.
one time, Neil, you're not going to believe this.
Mhm.
I tell my parrot joke. I At the break, this woman comes up and I can see the tears are coming, and I I have such a I can't believe you told that joke and I'm so offended. And I'm like, I know what happened. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, can you tell me what is this is about? And she looks at me and she said, that's all my father told when I was growing up as a child. One parrot joke after another. And I said,
Oh,
if I ever hear another parrot joke, I'm going to die. So I told a parrot joke, and I'm sitting there going, oh, I'm so sorry. So, at any rate, that's the life of an itinerant teacher that's an indulgent yogi.
well, yeah, no, that's that brings so many overlapping, layering
Yeah,
context. Just the for some who haven't, I've taught in other countries, and you almost have to look at this beautiful opportunity as you're not teaching your course to people in another country. You are in another culture, understanding how they need to learn, because it's so important. Because if you're there, teaching a group in Singapore, they learn way differently potentially than a group in New Zealand. And
right,
they may need you to be different, because if your goal, which I know that is who you are, your goal is to relay the work and help them. Well, you kind of need to know what's important to them
right.
from the nitty gritty level, like what's going to offend them or not. And, also to know how you can relay the work. There's some things that are, I know, universal, where you don't need to shift your language or anything like that when you're teaching such work of essence like yours. But I do know that in certain places you can say, um, in Singapore, the people that I taught were way more needing for us to spend more time on how to help them feel safe to move and emote freely, versus in New Zealand, this group that I taught, like, no, that was easy. They were like, we're used to that. Like, let's go deeper onto your intellectual conversations. Let's
Yeah.
go deeper on the nitty gritty. They just, so it's a good tension to hold, is to know how to share, and to know your audience, of course.
To know the right moment, and I think that's it for me with humor, because now when I teach, um, because of the student, the questions and answers and so forth, and it's usually by the second or third day, there'll be a question and answer, and the joke will pop up in my mind, and I'll
Mm,
say, that reminds me of a joke. And so I'll tell the joke, and usually get a decent amount of humor, because I have to deal with a translator. So if I'm going to tell a joke, sometime, and we make a joke out of that, that I'll whisper the joke to the translator in front of the whole room. So
mm,
it's kind of a shtick that we do in order to lighten up. The work of healing, Neil, as you know, is so heavy, and
mhm.
some of the clients we see are so compromised. And not that it's our job to lighten them up, but we have to lighten up as human beings,
Yeah,
and we
absolutely.
have to become light-hearted.
Yeah,
And I mean that metaphorically.
yeah, I love
Light
that.
as in the rainbow body of light, and
Mhm.
lighthearted as in humorous. And really, lighthearted means letting go. And when you let go, you let the light come through of the breath of life, is was what Dr. Sutherland said.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
very, very important.
Yeah, and so, as a parent, but also seeing families with kids, but seeing a person who I'm like, I tell them at the beginning, I'm like, I'm gonna explain what I'm finding, because usually by the time they come into me, they've been to many, and I said, I'm gonna narrate what I'm finding so that and you tell me at any time if I'm saying too much. You like a dimmer switch, you can turn me down, and or you tone. And some people are like, "Oh, I just tune you out." I'm like, "Perfect. Let my words be a meditation for what's going on." But most people are like, "No, no, no. We need to hear this." Like, Neil, I've been to so many people. If you're finding what's helping me, I want to know, because then I'll be able to settle into this session even more. So I say, "Great." But there's always this time where I look and I see somebody's face and I'm like, "Oh, they're so in it." That place of stillness, and the I'm gonna slow down and say less, and then, seeing them go into a moment where, like, I might unlock something, and they might be just in a state of joy, and they might wanna laugh, and I'm just like, "That's a time to take away your serious lecturing," even in a class when I'm teaching. So,
Right. Yeah.
um, there's an interesting parallel. I thought I heard you say this about when you studied with the Dalai Lama, and you at that time there was a really big emphasis on scholarship. And I thought, oh, that reminds me of Ida Rolf because, she wasn't just teaching a manual therapy practice. And I don't know this personally. I haven't studied with Ida Rolf, but I've studied much of the, Rolfing structural integration world. And I have had so many Rolfers come to my courses that I love being around what you all know. And but so that I know that, and of course Esalen, not too far away, human potential movement and where she came to teach, but she really emphasized scholarship, meaning she didn't want people just to come learn, she wanted them to become scholars to further the work. So I thought that was an interesting parallel with
Yeah.
two of your places. Did you study with Ida Rolf at that time? I can't recall when in time you
No,
studied with
I'm actually what they call a second generation Rolfer.
that. Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
Ida Rolf died in March of 1979, and I applied to become a Rolfer at the
Uh-huh.
Rolf Institute in that same March. So
Wow, okay.
she died, and then I get accepted in. But I think remember that Ida Rolf was also very influenced by the osteopathic tradition here in the
Yes,
United States, and
absolutely.
and she was a very smart, intelligent woman.
Mhm.
And in terms of humanistic psychology, in that focus, which was the original focus of Rolfing, but
Right.
the influence of osteopathy, and
Mhm.
osteopathy is anatomy, anatomy, anatomy. You've got to keep studying, studying, studying
Mhm.
anatomy. So that got hammered into me early, is
Mm.
that continual study of anatomy. And it led to me editing a book on uh, Ruth Werner's eighth edition of Pathology for Massage Therapists.
Hmm.
And this was like 8 or 9 years ago. And I was editing it and I went, oh my God, this is not about anatomy and physiology anymore. This is about metabolism. And you're expecting massage therapists and manual therapists in the United States to have a college level, almost biochemistry understanding of metabolism. And
Mhm.
that's when I began switching into I need to know this because I'm
Right.
asked to edit this book. And
Yeah.
so that's been a focus on the knowledge base of how can we know about without becoming biochemists and cell biologists. We still need to know some of that because that's the sickness of our time.
Mhm.
That is the illness of our time, the pandemic of metabolic disorders and
Mhm.
what's called metabolic syndrome. And your dad's a cardiologist and he knows this, that
Mhm.
93% of Americans have a metabolically unhealthy heart. We
Mhm.
have a very, very sick country. And
Mhm.
so in part of what I'm inspired to offer was in that biodynamic heart book and then the biodynamics of the immune system, because you got to heal the immune system. That's number one. You got to heal the gut. If you're going to heal any system of the body, because my wife is certified in Swiss biological medicine at Biomedicine International in
Mm.
Sonnenberg, Hotel Sonnenberg, the clinic there in Schwelbrunn,
Mhm.
Switzerland. Dr. Thomas Rau, famous oncologist. And you've got to heal the gut, and the immune system is 80% in the lining of the gut. And the point of view here is that all metabolic disorders have their roots in the gut. So the
Mhm.
healing of the gut, the healing of the immune system has to happen in order to start healing the cardiovascular system, the brain, and so forth. You've heard of leaky gut, right?
Well, yeah.
Oh yeah. So leaky gut, the destruction of our GI tube and all of that. And we could get deep into that, but we don't need to. But the fenestrations, the spaces between the cells of the epithelium have degenerated to a point where molecules are getting through that don't belong in our body. And that upregulates the liver and the cardiovascular system. It creates inflammation, but it also begins to really destroy the spaces, the fenestrations between the endothelial cells throughout the entire bloodstream. That means leaky gut, leaky heart, leaky liver, and leaky brain. Welcome
Mhm.
to dementia. Welcome to diabetes. Welcome to all of that. It's all we got a leaky body that needs to be
Yeah.
healed. So,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir here,
No,
but
no, it's good. It's
yeah,
good. I'm really no, it's really valuable to explain this and articulate it because you're tying together the topics that, I know people need to hear more of, including me, just because what you're sharing is at the essence of this. We need to, find keys. This is where the alchemy comes in. I know it's from compromised to alchemized. We need solutions now more than ever because of the increase in the amount of stress people experience physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this with children as well. I was shocked last week that there's been like a 30% increase in stillbirths. I work with one midwife in particular. We stay and we've
Hmm.
taught together, and it's just stunning. When she's caught 5,000 babies. I mean, when you
Yeah.
catch 5,000 babies, it's a wealth of knowledge there. But the
Yeah.
point being that a lot of infants now are compromised, and that a lot of pregnancies are compromised metabolically. Gestational diabetes. Well, that's a metabolic syndrome. And so when you see infants being born and then being obese within a month after birth from
Hmm.
a genetic disposition because of the gestational diabetes. So it's a huge problem with this increase. So on the one hand, we can work with our hands, but we also have to help people with the lifestyle,
Yeah.
with the diet, the nutrition, and all of that is particularly touchy in terms of the metabolic syndromes and the medical community because of the
Hmm.
split within the medical community in general around all of this, from the conservative end of it. You got to handle it with pharmaceuticals, to the other end of it with functional medicine and Dr. Rao, where you got to handle this with lifestyle and healing the gut if you're going to get anywhere with it. It's a very difficult thing in pediatrics because it's a family system, and you're dealing with a family system, and you're dealing with a golden cow. You
Yeah.
cannot tell a pediatrician, and you cannot tell a gynecologist, and you cannot tell these birth experts how to do their practice, because they are considered the golden cow in medicine, because they are bringing the next life onto the planet. And it's their bailiwick, and the politics is very intense. So, just coming at it, from our end, from my end, in particular, I get a consult with brain damage a lot, with the infants. And what I
Hmm.
can recommend, excuse me, because I've taught at a number of pediatric clinics, the ketogenic diet, Neil, for infants and children with developmental delays, this means brain damage, but they're called developmental delays. The literature on this has been out since the 1920s.
Mm.
Ketogenic diet for infants and children. That means, and I saw this in every clinic when they introduced this literature, and they got the parents to reduce dairy,
Hmm.
reduce sugar and carbs, and to increase high quality fats. So I'm recommending like a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of organic flaxseed oil or organic pumpkin seed oil in the pick lines of some of these infants that have these neurological challenges. But once you introduce and reduce and introduce, you see a dramatic change in brain chemistry, because the brain functions better with ketones than it
Hmm.
does with glucose. It's just for the brain. I'm not saying the rest of the body. Your muscles need a little more glucose than ketones, but that's also controversial. So the point being, there's a sickness on our land, and there's a sickness on this planet, and we have to help it at the lifestyle physical, but we also have to help it at the spiritual level, because the physical and many of the medical challenges and the pharmaceuticals aren't working. Okay,
Hmm.
so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but we need to add in a spiritual component that's not tied to a specific religion, or you got to do this or that. It's got to be a creative process, but it's an inward process, because people have to find their heart. Neil,
Hmm.
you've got to find your heart, and you've got to find a way to relax, because it's an inside job. If you want to change your diet, that means you're going to have to change something inside. So
Hmm.
it's not just about your gut, it's about your mind, and it's about your heart, the emotional heart and your spiritual heart. That also has to go through a healing process and deal with your humanity. So I'm kind of ranting now, but
No,
uh,
it's good. I appreciate that. I appreciate the rant because you're passionate, and I appreciate the passionate, um, kind of, because I felt myself thinking like, I want to ask Michael, compromised to alchemized? How can we go from compromised? Started out with me saying, how can we go from a compromised airway to an alchemized airway because of the work that I do? And then I spread, my wife recommended take out the airway part because it was like way more people are in this gauntlet of how can we go from compromise, suffering, strain, pain to the joy, the beauty, the healing we need, which is done through alchemy and the nonlinear journey of healing. But what does alchemy look like to spell that out? It's not some magical mystical practice only. This is actually just all of life, but you listed so many ingredients towards what you think would help us as humanity heal. So if you could list, the top three, the alchemy top three of how can we go? How can we go into this next phase with an alchemy that produces healing, but also joy? What would you narrow down the lens to help guide people?
Well, I think, what I'm promoting in the book, Neil, is, again, the healing is going to happen through the heart, but the healing is
Hmm.
also going to happen through the cardiovascular system in general.
Yeah.
So there's an access point in terms of metabolism through the gut and the
Hmm.
epithelium and the food we eat and so forth. But the other access point is through the tree of life, through the vascular tree. And I
Hmm.
think that's a very important point. So, for instance, when you talk about alchemy or the spiritual process, we can traffic in that terminology. Let's say, with the chakras, for example. And so we have a throat chakra. So if you have a child that's tongue tied, or you have a child that is compromised, maybe from the pharyngeal arches, because we had that conversation, and so
Hmm.
forth, how would you heal that? If you wanted to come in it from a spiritual point of view, if you wanted to, like, whatever that might mean, but I mean from the chakra point of view, well, you'd come at it from the cardiovascular point of view, because that's the access point spiritually through the blood, through the endothelium, and through the heart itself. So you would have lifestyle stuff with the gut, but you physically you would come into relationship with the arteries feeding the thyroid gland.
Hmm.
You would come into relationship with the arteries that are feeding the tongue. And it turns out that the inferior thyroid artery is exiting with the laryngeal artery that serves the tongue. And that inferior thyroid artery then goes down to the thyroid. And then you've got the superior thyroid artery that's coming off of that um, subclavian artery and going to the thyroid. So that's where I treat an infant. I treat in that area. I not only treat like the first rib to make sure that the breathing and all of that is happening, but for an infant, you have to treat the thyroid, because
Hmm.
that's what's running their breathing metabolism as an infant. But I don't have to put a finger on their thyroid. I can come in through the side and treat the carotid artery and then differentiate inferior, superior, and inferior thyroid artery. And I'm treating the vascular tree. I know I'm treating the throat chakra, and I'm treating the capacity to increase circulation and have better tone and so forth. And even if there has to be a medical intervention, the healing will happen much more rapidly
Hmm.
within that context. So I always go to the artery first, and because I know that's the spiritual entrance in all traditions. The Kabbalistic tradition, the Jewish tradition. I was just looking at that over the weekend in terms of how that they talk about embryology, but the tree of life maps to the cardiovascular system as the tree of life. In all other spiritual traditions, or most of them, also have that same mapping. Tibetan medicine has that same mapping, or a relative to that same mapping, and they add in color.
Yeah.
So, so number one, I map to the cardiovascular system. Number two, I map to the epithelium and to the gut and to the immune system. And number three, I map to meditation and humor.
Hmm.
Um, so
Love it.
that's kind of the triad that I work with. And you'll see in the book that, the reason I got here is I don't have this, I don't never felt I had a mission in life. I don't have a purpose driven life, as Rick Warren would call it from the book.
Yeah.
Life comes to me. And when life came to me, that's the first chamber. That's the first chamber of the heart. Yeah, it is the fifth chamber. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you for that.
Yeah, and I'm just, to those who can see this, holding up the beautiful book, and I'm always in a mirror image here, right? So how do I hold it
Yeah.
up?
There you go.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, I love that. There's so many pages I've like, if this was a book review and if this was a book club, oh my gosh, we would have had so much. Um, because I love some of the images, you give, and there's just so many points in that book that it's a treatise on how to, and I got really excited as a person who's known some of your work, but there's so much. Anybody that's heard me on podcasts has the top two things I've talked about until this 2025 were the kidney, always the kidney, embryologically taking people down the rabbit hole of understanding how the kidney has this inextricable relationship to the floor of the mouth. That's my life work is on the floor of the mouth, and what I've uncovered there with these 70 areas. But then there's a top four, my floor four, which are the top four areas that influence the floor of the mouth to distill it. And there's a lot more to that, but it's the kidney is always going to be one of the number ones. But the one that I'm talking about the most this last year, with a course that, anyways, that I've got coming up is the thyroid. And I've got some videos of releasing thyroid on an adult after a tongue tie release, and she got really inflamed and she couldn't talk. And I released the thyroid in like seconds, and instantly her speech went back to nearly 100% articulation.
Yeah.
But way more important, nah, it's not way more important, but just as important is what you're talking about. It's infants coming in. It's one of the top things I'll look at is their thyroid and approaching it from different perspectives, fascially,
Yeah.
viscerally. But I loved reading the specific teaching you have on the arterial relationships, the flow, and that being so primary because I value that. And I think for somebody, when people come, they they're just astonished that the thyroid gland could have an effect on feeding for their baby, right? And I'm like, well, I know. However, once you see it, they're like, you can't unsee that, and they become teachers that teach their friends. Like,
Right.
your baby's struggling, you might need to have the thyroid helped. And I've loved people just it makes sense to people. They're like, well, the thyroid's right there. Why wouldn't that matter? So it's almost like, wow, it's so simple, yet the you could say with anything that simple, it's profound because what it takes someone who's learned so much to distill things down to such a simple point is a very difficult task. But I feel you've done that in your book, like in a pretty phenomenal way. And so I love your discussion on the thyroid because it hit home with me too.
Oh, that's good. And I tell you, in the immune system book, the biodynamics of the immune system, there is a whole protocol in that book on treating infants and treating. I go through what the recommended protocol for treating the cardiovascular system of the infant.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing, for infants, doing up and down, doing the thyroid, is to treat the gut and to treat the celiac plexus, the superior mesenteric artery, because blood perfusion is profound in the first several hours in days after birth that set up digestion in the intestines. So treating those arteries in the gut are extremely important, and also treating the umbilicus if there's been umbilical shock and so forth. So I always treat the gut, and I always treat, this neck area and especially the
Mm-hmm.
thyroid because of breathing and digestion.
Yeah.
Those are the key points right there. So I think those are really key points right there. And in terms of treating pregnant women, there is a protocol in that section of the biodynamic heart book that's written by a midwife, a very dear friend of mine, Michelle Doyle. And so she goes over a treatment protocol for treating pregnant women. So, and it also involves the cardiovascular system.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very, very important um, inputs for the contemporary client that might be compromised metabolically, especially a pregnant mom. So very important. And I,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That is so good. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. That struck me also in there. I was like, you're a wealth of information. So, okay. Well, we have a million more topics to discuss in the next few minutes, but we can't. So, I just love you. I want to ask you one question, if I could, before our conversation comes to an end. Um, and just to say, there is too much more. So I'll also say, like, where, okay, maybe I'll ask this now, just so that people, where can they, how do they pursue? I know you have your website, and is that the main place people can reach out and find out more about? And we'll have this in the show notes, of course, but just for those who are listening, um, with your work, how can people, do you still take patients, but also how do people find you?
Well, they do find me through the website. Basically, I'm on a writing sabbatical right now, so I'm not taking new clients. I have some clients that I see, but they're
Sure.
my old clients that you can't let the old
Yeah.
clients go. But I don't take on new clients right now. But I do a lot of phone consultations, and I do a lot of supervision with teachers
Hmm.
and clinicians. So that's part of my work. My classroom work is oriented mainly in Europe. So if you want to come to Europe, we can do some classroom work there. I'm going to create a platform because I've got a ton of video footage of me teaching. Like the
Hmm.
immune book, I put all of those protocols on videotape and they're just sitting there. So, and a lot of the vascular protocols. So within the next year, I'll have a platform where you can, tune in and purchase the hands-on stuff around all of that. So it's a work in progress. Especially at my age, and in trying to get the help we need to do it because you got to hire the kids, and the kids know this stuff.
Hmm.
So it's really good that way. So that's the main way to get hold of me. Can't I do a lot of referrals, but I won't take on a new client right now.
Okay.
Maybe in the summer, but I'll pick in mangoes in the summer. So,
Oh
but at
yeah.
any rate, through the website, that's the main thing.
Great. And we kind of, in so many ways, you answered my question that I tend to ask everybody, which is, inspired by The Alchemist. Um, you know, what is your personal legend? What are you put on this planet to do, and what compels you? And part of that though is like, what do you dream about? What's your dream? So like Santiago in the book, is in pursuit of his treasure. This is the question, and the universe conspires in your favor when you are in pursuit of your personal legend. And you may say like, yeah, you just shared so much of that with what you were, encouraged by the Dalai Lama to do. So I'll ask you the second part of the question, and then you could answer both of them. But is okay. So if you have your personal legend, what you're, to save lives, to focus on the heart, with this, that you could say more. How do you stay on that path? How do you know this map that you're following of your life? Like, how do you, just as an instructional for others on how they can either find out what their personal legend is, or more just how do you continually tap in to know you're on the path that you know, that is yours, that is Michael's, for this path, for this life?
There's a Zen koan. There's only one koan, you.
Mm,
Neil, I'm on this path because I got to figure out me. The
mhm,
first chapter in my book describes this horrendous trauma that I went through in the military.
mhm,
I have 100% service related PTSD disability. I've been on a killing field. And when you're on a killing field in the military and you see all the blood, you get immediate ordination as a warrior priest. So it's taken me that long to heal, to recognize that warrior priest energy that I have. I didn't set out to heal other people. I set out to pay my mortgage or pay my rent when I became a massage therapist. I didn't even like people, but I knew I needed a job and I didn't want to go back into the corporate world. I was supposed to go to law school. And so I gradually over time, and that's in the book, the reason I got in pediatrics, it almost brings a tear to my eyes. These children taught me compassion. They
mm,
taught me how to heal myself. I didn't get into this, and I didn't know that so that I could, look good because I work with infants and children or whatever. They healed me
mm,
every time I'm with these children, and no matter how severely compromised they were. And I saw the worst, Neil. I saw children that were tortured and asked to work on them.
mm,
So I saw the worst, and I could look in their eyes, and I learned from them that I had to get into a direct line of communication with them, that no matter how compromised these children are, that I could still form a relationship with them. And in that relationship, they healed me. I needed a lot of healing, and I still need a lot of healing. So what I say to anybody listening to this is, compassion is about the self first, self-compassion, self-healing. You have to take care of yourself first. And that's really what I've been doing. And it's because I'm in the field that I'm brought into circumstances that I get to heal my stuff first. And in the learning of how to heal my stuff, I've been able to, you call it a legend, but I've been able to discover that I have a gift. I like to teach. I like to have fun with people in that way. And now I like people. So, and I like to tell jokes and so forth. And I like to be with people in that domain. But it's, the older I get, I still have to take more time for myself because of the energy involved with that. So my advice to people, you got to take care of yourself. It's really only up to you. It's you are the bus driver. You are the experiencer. And so it's up to you to deal with your life. And from that legend or that gift, can awaken. I feel that when people come into my class now, Neil, that it's my job to help wake up their gift. Yeah, I have this other stuff, the hands-on, everybody, because that's the community we live in. But underneath that, I want people to have the same experience I had. I'm not interested in people mimicking me or whatever, or creating a legend around Michael Shea, because that's not the way I function. I function because I had to heal myself, Neil. And I really encourage people to orient to yourself first and heal yourself. And the greatest thing you can do is get out in nature and take a walk in nature. I live a block from the ocean. I mean, I meditate. We've talked about all these spiritual lifestyle things in this talk, which, we're preaching to the choir because many people have heard that. You've got to get out and turn inward, go out, turn inward, and learn that swinging door of going out and turning inward in terms of your own healing. Because that, you can't help other people if you don't have that within yourself. That's how I function.
Well, that's simple and sweet and profound. So I love that. Go that swinging door, going out and turning inward. Yeah, I love that. So, well, thank you, Michael, for this conversation. The conversations we had just, in getting ready for today, or just to set up this interview podcast conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. I feel like there's so much wisdom that you shared, and I will be tuning in for all the things you're doing. Especially, I can't wait to this for this humor website to come out. So I'll be staying posted. Sorry, we didn't mean to make you spit up your drink there, but it's great to look forward to. So, well, you've shared so much. So again, thank you for your time. I want anybody who's not currently aware of Michael Shea's work, you got to. It's I've referenced you at symposia. Whenever I share about from you and Shariona Menzum Sills. I've interviewed her once, and she's coming on the podcast again next week because I know you mentioned Franklin, and so you two are some of the most mentioned people. As many, I also mentioned many osteopaths who I would consider, the greats in terms of like what they've distilled and shared. But yeah, as it is, hope people find humor, levity, joy, and they imagine Michael learning from llamas, and Lama Lama and and the Dalai Lama all wrapped up into one. So tell us what you think. I'd love to hear your comments, and tell us what more you want to know from this amazing world that Michael Shea has opened up to you. So again, thanks, Michael, for being with me.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Compromised to Alchemized podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music, this track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa, my team, for podcast publishing, and my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day.
This is major.